Oh, good afternoon. It is July 1st, 2018. It's the Gold, Goats, and Guns half hour here on Periscope. My name's Tom Luongo. I hope you're having a great weekend and catch up on the news. So, I wanted to get back to doing these kind of shorter form live streams, discussions on this. I want to kind of go over what I see happening in headlines this morning. So a lot of the stuff that's happening geopolitically right now is all about the upcoming Trump-Putin summit. But I think more importantly, we need to tie that also to the NATO summit for that, 4 or 5 days before that. Seeing a lot of pre-positioning from the part of Trump and even Putin to a certain degree, but more Trump really is at this point. I keep seeing headlines over and over again that tell me that Trump is trying to de-escalate and set U.S.-Russian relations and try and set Putin mood before sitting down to talk with him. And, you know, for the last 18 months or so that Trump's been in office, it's been one bad news after spate of bad news after another concerning Russian-U.S. relations, with dramatic rows and false flag chemical attacks creating dramatic expulsions and sanctions and all of this stuff. And we've gotten multiple reports over the last few months that a lot of those things happened against Trump's will, or that his staff sabotaged him by, for example, having the U.S. trap him into overreacting happen. For example, in response to the poisoning of Yulia and Sergei Skripal, the former Russian agent, his staff, there was a report at the Washington Post who said that his staff purposefully misled him about what their response should be. And we expelled over 60 diplomats in response to what the European Union did, as opposed to what Germany did. And Trump only really wanted to expel, say, 3 or 4 diplomats and wanted 60, and he was very. So as we watch the pre-positioning happening with Trump and Putin, it's pretty obvious to me now that Trump is beginning to take control of the messaging and take control of his neocon, obnoxious policy advisors. That means the John Boltons, the Haleys, and the rest. And that this upcoming summit between him and Putin is incredibly important. We're not sure who on the staff it was. Lover of Freedom, getting the question of who was it that sabotaged Trump over the Skripal poisoning response. I'm not sure. The Washington Post, of course, never tells you who did it, but the reports from there was that Trump was furious about that. And I think I've got that in a blog post a while back when it actually happened. But this morning I just published a post over my blog over at goldgoatsandguns.com, talking about how now, with this NATO summit coming and with looking farther into the future, when we have sanctions go back on to Iran in November, that 2 countries are becoming very important in the axis of resistance to this policy, shift in policy. And one is Turkey, pretty obvious. We've talked about this at length. The other one is India. And we'll start in Turkey. So with Erdogan being reelected the other day, and not necessarily with as strong a majority as he would have liked, but with him being reelected, and with so many energy projects out there between Turkey, having been negotiated between him and Putin over atomic energy, nuclear energy, which they've broken ground on India's first nuclear power plant, and then obviously the Turk Stream pipeline as well. And if you notice, that Trump has said almost nothing about Turkstream. Nothing at all. And it purports, and in the end, it's most likely going to deliver more gas to Europe than Nord Stream 2 will. So that begs the question, so why isn't Trump angry about Turkstream being a threat to Europe's energy security? And it gets back to, again, things I've been saying about Trump's desire to take down Germany, take down Merkel. Because Nord Stream 2 is a means by which Merkel and Germany can bypass old gas transit routes through Ukraine into Poland, and then that gas will no longer go through Ukraine. It'll go to Germany first and then be redistributed back out to the rest of Europe. And now Germany holds the key to Poland's political future by being able to turn off the gas tap. And that's, I think, the main reason why Trump was against Nord Stream. It had very little to do with Gazprom getting more market share in Europe. The Poles were never going to go back to buying gas from the Russians, because the Russians are probably not going to transit gas through Ukraine because Ukraine is destroyed. So until Ukraine is settled, until the Poroshenko government is out of power, until we no longer have a failed state for all intents and purposes in Ukraine, I don't see Gazprom re-upping the contract with Naftogaz, at least under any kind of economic. The relationship is just miserable at this point. No amount of geostrategic wrangling, I think, will ameliorate that situation. Now, but that's, so you can see the difference in the two policies, right? Nord Stream 2, 55 billion cubic meters a year. The most unbelievably heinous, evil thing on the planet, right? That has to be stopped. The other side of it, 4 streams coming out of Turkstream at 18.75 BCMs apiece is nearly 69 billion, right? So it's like 30% bigger ultimately than Nord Stream 2, and it's going to service Italy and Greece and Bulgaria and Austria and Turkey and Hungary. They all want a piece of that. They all want a piece of it. And I just find it interesting that that's not a major political football. So the question now is, and yes, Putin, the authority was piped in to tell me that, remind me that that Putin has said that Belarus can basically replace Ukrainian pipelines, right? That if Gazprom wants to bring those pipelines across, that they'll augment current gas transit system. Ukraine. Now, interestingly, we've been talking for weeks now about all these kind of pre-summit dividends, like no sanctions on Nord Stream 2. Just kidding. The U.S. declaring that they will not support the rebels' defense against the SAA in southwestern Syria, set between Damascus and Golan Heights around Raqqa, which, by the way, that campaign is quickly going to come to a conclusion. Just without U.S. support, without U.S. opposition, the rebels are going to, ISIS are going to be wiped out completely. Oh my God, Joanne, you spoiled it for me. I haven't watched the World Cup. I was going to download it and watch it replay. But that's awesome. That's fantastic. The Russians beat Spain, FYI. That's amazing. So Portugal's out, Germany's out, Spain is out. All of a sudden we have to go from geopolitics into the World Cup, which, by the way, NetDrag, if you're listening, are related. So just had the twist tonight one more time, dude. So that's fantastic. I mean, never underestimate the home team at the World Cup. It happens over and over and over. Even the Americans played well at their World Cup, right? I mean, and we're terrible internet. They won on a penalty. No, it's okay. I'll live. Spoilers don't usually bother me, but I was kind of hoping to stay spoiler free until I got there. But I'm so busy today, I'm not even sure I'm going to get a chance to watch the game. But going back to Turkey and going back to their leverage, if you look at the situation, Turkey is so important to NATO staying together. It's so important geostrategically that honestly, Erdogan has all the chips in the world to effectively rake Trump over a barrel. And it's going to be really hard for Trump to just turn around and go dictate to Erdogan and say, do X, Y, and Z, or we'll do what? I mean, Turkey is, Erdogan's already pledged to triple bilateral trade between them and Iran. It's only $10 billion a year. But these aren't terribly huge economies. Moving Iran up from $10 billion to $30 billion a year is a lot, and most of that's going to be in energy. Okay, because nuclear power plant's not going to come online until beginning. It's going to come on until 2023. It's not going to be fully operational 2025 or 2026. So between now and then, Turkey is going to be absolutely baseload is going to be absolutely dependent upon natural gas imports from Russia and natural and oil and natural Iran. So in no way not going to change. So expect, so with that, and then we know that the Iranians are listing their oil on the Shanghai Exchange in Iran. Turkey already has a massive trade surplus with China, meaning they're building up yuan reserves at a tremendous rate. And sorry, I'm reading. It's so hard sometimes to keep a train of thought when you're reading the comments as they go through. But that China has, that Turkey runs a big trade deficit with China already. So there's a tremendous amount of yuan being built up within Turkey, and you got to realize here that building up yuan reserves for Turkey right now is ammunition to defy Trump on Iran sanctions by then turning around and buying Iranian oil on the Shanghai Exchange in yuan on the futures market and coordinating their supply chain that their supplies in perpetuity in yuan. It's something that was not available in 2012. It was not available the last time Iran was cut off from the world financial system. So this is really important. So it's really great. So Brennan Proctor, it's your comment that derailed my thought because I saw the word subscribed in that. So I saw your comment. The sound thing is most likely not my compression setting on my microphone. It's most likely just bandwidth. I live rurally in North Florida, and I have not the world's greatest bandwidth. Sometimes it cuts out simply because the health of the stream. We're running on the ragged edge. It is what it is, and it's the best I can do until the rules change in the United States. I live on the wrong side of the county border. I live in the rural county. I don't live in the actual county. I live in one of the sparsely populated counties, and therefore I barely have internet that's decent. Because of LATAs and franchise cable. The local cable company in my hometown can't cross the border, can't cross the county border. They're not allowed, even though there's no reason why they can't bring a wire over here. So I'm stuck on really crappy DSL. All right, so, but thank you for subscribing. I greatly appreciate it. And yeah, it's been great being able to do Lee and Garland's show on Sputnik multiple times, and hopefully we'll continue to do that in the future. So, and Lee's even drop in here. So, all right. So you look at the situation with Turkey. They have leverage because we can't have Turkey leave, right? And Erdogan knows that we were likely behind the coup attempt in 2020. We've been driving the destruction of Turkish debt and the lira and everything else in the run up to Erdogan's election. And I want to remind everybody to watch the Turkish lira very carefully now. Of Q2, the quarterly chart looks terrible, but the monthly chart we didn't in June. We closed with an inside bar within May's bar, which is telling me that with the worst of the weakness in the Turkish lira may be over, and that you may be looking at. I start watching the weekly charts for a bullish reversal on the lira, consequently, say, Turkish on the Turkish stock market, because this may be a really great contrarian opportunity coming together there. I got my last article on Alpha went over the opportunity, which was surprisingly well received. Usually, when I write an article like that on Seeking Alpha, I say it, but the Ameritrash comes in and says, "Oh, you're crazy," and I'm like, "Wow," because the last time I did this, and I said the same thing last year about Qatar, after the Saudis started the economic blockade of Qatar, and I said, well, watch carefully for a bottom here, especially if the Qataris have to depeg. If they depeg, the currency is going to drop like a rock. The stock market is going to crash in dollar terms, and you're going to be able to buy QAT, which is the Qatar ETF, at stink bid prices, and you'll make 40% on the rebound. So, Thordoom asks, don't you think that the Turks will join the SEO as an observer in the near future? I just think that, I think that that's the process, but they first have to leave NATO before they do that. So do I think that that's the long-term scenario? Yes. Do I think that the United States is going to do everything imaginable to keep that from happening? Yes. And therefore, this upcoming NATO summit, I just see either Trump is going to cut Erdogan loose completely, and that would be a major signal that he's ready to wash his hands clean of Syria completely. Very possible. It also means that the whole regime change narrative that's being stoked by Giuliani and all these other freaking neocon dead enders isn't going to happen. So, but long term, Turkey has to align with Eurasian integration. It just does, because the American influence in the region is waning. The best that we have is, I watched the interview that one of you linked me to a great interview with Pepe Escobar, the great international journalist. It was about an hour long. I finally got a chance to watch it yesterday morning, and he kept reminding me and everybody else, and it's not like I didn't know 90% of what Pepe was talking about, but it's always good to just kind of hear it as one big unit, right? And it's very obvious that Eurasian integration is not something that we can stop, and that all we have left in the world, really, on our side, is Israel and Saudi Arabia. And you'll notice how that's always the focus of all of the Western talk about the U.S., Israeli, Saudi Arabian alliance. But it does not necessarily mean that alliance is gaining in strength. It just means that it's gaining in solidity. Whereas I think players like Turkey, and now I want to now move to India, both of them will continue to play both sides against the middle. Both the Russia-China-Iran alliance, or basically, for a lack of a better term, the OBOR, or Eurasian Integration Alliance, and the United States, right, and the West. They're pivotal players here, and they've got room to maneuver to get whatever they can out of both sides. They can get major concessions from both sides. So Merkel's crappy immigration deal that was announced late Friday afternoon had a number of concessions to Turkey in it. So basically bribes Turkey, right? Not going to work. It's not enough. India's in the same position. India's been like straddling the fence about Eurasian integration for years, and we keep going in there and poking a snake and poking the border issue between China, just keep them at odds with one another, and the same with India, Pakistan. But at the end of the day, these are all rearguard actions. These are all really, they can't affect the long-term trend. It's like when you look at it in stock market terms. You see some day-to-day squiggle stuff where, oh my God, there was a headline today that dropped the stock 15%, but so what? Or 10% or whatever, and like, oh my God, what happened? And then you back out and you look at the weekly, monthly, quarterly, and yearly charts, and you're like, the farther out in time you go, the less interesting that huge move that happened just today looks. The same thing that's happening in geopolitics. Every once in a while, you kind of step back and look at, this is why I look at the market or look at the story, right, from effectively multiple time frames. Right. So right now we're talking about India and Turkey's leverage in the next two weeks and over the course of the next 2 months. But in the long term, over the course of the next years, oh no, Eurasian integration all the way. Neither of them will be a member of either NATO. NATO won't even exist at some point. Right? And the SCO will be the means by which OBOR and the Eurasian Economic Union and the BRICS banks and the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, all those new institutions that are being built and gaining in power and gaining in relevance, they're the big trend. They're the long-term trend. And the long-term trend is also a waning of the U.S. overseas military and empire. Intents purposes, mercantilist empire. So that's the big thing. So it's funny. I never really put it in these terms before, but you guys know that I believe in the fractal nature. That I believe that patterns you see on a short-term chart mean exactly the same as they do on a long-term chart when you're at magnitude of price moves stock chart. But you have to be able to look at the price movements in all time frames to get a full picture of what's actually happening. So you don't overreact to short-term moves or underreact to larger term. Okay? So, and you can do the same thing in geopolitics. That's kind of ultimately, I think, what I do in general. That's how I approach all of it. And for the newsletter, I try and only look at things, because in geopolitics, you really can't react to the day-to-day stuff. Then you're just a day trader. Who the hell? Why are you buying a monthly newsletter from somebody who's giving you day trading advice? You're not. It's a monthly newsletter, so you should be only looking at the trends from a quarterly, minimum a monthly, but really quarterly, half-yearly, yearly basis, and year basis. The only thing that makes any sense to me. So, and I'm not really interested in writing just a commodities exploration newsletter. There's plenty of those out there, and there are a ton of them out there that do a better job of assessing mining companies than I do. I mean, I'm not the world's best mining company out. I could be, but I don't want to be. I mean, but there are plenty of guys out there much better at assessing. And I just stand on their, to be honest with you, they just stand on their shoulders and go, that's a great project, and then we should buy that at this stage of the development, because that's where your highest risk or your lowest risk to reward ratio is. That's kind of the where I see myself. That whole space. Thorium says Lavrov gave an interview on Channel 4 about the end of the Western World Order. Yeah, there's been a number of those things coming out of Russian media. The Russian political chattering classes is really sowing its oats at this point. And they're right in so many ways. So when you look at India, right, the thing that, getting back to India because it's really important. Okay, so we know that India showed up with bells on to the SCO summit. India and Pakistan now both are full members of the SCO. India has been toying with Eurasian Economic Union status of one form or another, and for some kind of informal status. Obviously, they're not going to do anything as long as they're still courting, favors from the Americans and trying to get concessions out of the Americans. That would be a red line that they're not going to cross. Modi's not going to cross. But it's very obvious that India and Iran have a very strong economic relationship. And I know we've talked about this in the past, but I'm going to remind you of it, that India also doesn't really want to be a part of One Belt, One Road. They don't really want to be a part of China's big plan. They don't, they want to have they're very Indian about this. They want to have their own thing, right? And it's a way for them to keep their feet on both sides of the border, half in the west, east. And their, long-term animosity between them and the Chinese is, and so it makes sense. So what happens? So India took over the renovation project for the port at Chabahar in southeastern Iran, near the Iranian Pakistani, and they want to do that, make that into a massive deep water port, obviously, probably with even an LNG export terminal, I think, among other things. And then there's also a major rail line they want to put in as part of the north-south transport corridor. Look that up. Even just looking up like the Wikipedia on the north-south transport corridor will do you some good just to get an idea of what I'm talking about. But you go straight north from Chabahar up to Mashhad, which is very close to the Afghani border, and then you go from there, you can go up to Tehran and east up into Afghanistan. So the rail line from Chabahar to Mashhad is very important, and then the port upgrade at Chabahar is also. Both of these projects have been started, but everybody's dragging their feet on implementing them because Trump has been, for over a year, threatening to dismantle the JCPOA, put the sanctions back on Iran, and make it near impossible for contractors, Indian banks, to do the business necessary to get this stuff off the ground. And they don't want to commit billions of dollars to these projects and then all of a sudden not be able to complete them because they just can't pay people, right? So all of that has helped to stifle the growth of those two projects. They're very important to India. And now Nikki Haley is in India right now, and she just said that she has to help, that the United States now has to help with the rail line and Chabahar upgrades because she understands that they're important, that they have to be done. And then someone asked her at the same time, well, aren't you guys trying to stop? Won't that benefit Iran? Aren't you guys trying to destroy Iran and create regime change? She's like, yeah, we're going to have to thread the needle on this. Idiot, it's not funny. But the point is, this is a pure pandering to the Indians. This is an important project for India. It's important that they be able to open up their markets into open up Eastern Iran so they can get access to Central Asia and the former Soviet stands, Afghanistan, and Russia can bring a pipeline down directly into. I mean, the Russians want to bring gas and oil down north-south out of Siberia to that whole region, and India wants to be a part of all that, and the United States is holding them back because of policy uncertainty. So Nikki Haley going to India and saying that tells me that, hey man, all of this stuff, at the end of the day, these two countries have so much leverage over the U.S. It's pretty impressive. They're going to get everything they want. They're not going to get shut out of the world banking, of the U.S. dollar banking system. They might, to some extent or another. There'll be some sanctions, but just almost at a saving face for Christ. But at the end of the day, both of them are going to buy oil from Iran. Make no mistake about it. They'll probably expand the amount of oil that they buy from Iran, especially if Iran and India can come to an agreement about the South Pars B gas field, which has been a bone of contention between the two of them for years about getting a deal together. And they're both, they're at loggerheads over $200 million. What does that sound like? Sounds like South Korea not getting a gas pipeline, because it's like everything else. It's the Americans and putting pressure on India to not sign a deal with Iran. But at the end of the day, someone has to make a deal. Indians need the gas development. They've got billions already invested in South Pars. They don't want to see the investment go to gas, their investment operation go to Gazprom or somebody, or CNPC or somebody. Aries. I don't want to see that. So eventually somebody has to make a deal, and both sides haven't blinked yet. This has been on for years, but something's going to happen. You bet that that's another area that you can watch to see where the who's actually in charge of the situation, who's actually in charge of the relationship. So, when Pepe Escobar yesterday was reminding me of just how much the U.S. is alienated, not just with Trump, but with Obama and Bush the Lesser and Clinton and everybody. I alienated so many people through bullying and extortion over the years. Now at that point, that now that certain other countries have gotten strong enough that they can say no, which is why I've always said that the Russians moving into Syria when they did will be marked in history as the peak of the U.S.'s ability to project power around the world, because it's the moment in which a major power said no. Once one person says no, everybody can start. But it has to start there. Okay? That was the big one. No mistake. We are going to talk about this when we're all a lot older and a lot grayer, and I have even less hair than I have now. And the big question is where Trump stands in all this. At the 29-minute mark, so I'm going to wrap this up. I think that Trump understands all of these dynamics. I think that Trump is trying to stage a graceful exit on a lot of these issues that were left over and exacerbated. But they're left over from the Obama administration and exacerbated by Obama administration holdovers and the quote-unquote deep state operatives in all the alphabet agencies trying to force him to things that, to do things and be involved in things that he doesn't want to be involved in. Now, that being said, I absolutely do believe he wants regime change. I think that's one of his animating principles. I think that he will overcommit U.S. resources and U.S. Political capital in order to get it done. And I think it's going to bite him in the ass. Personally. Wrong. I'm happy to be wrong. But I think that's where we are. But it very much looks to me like building off of the win with North Korea diplomatically, right? That he now has the upper hand on his neocon handlers, and he has the upper hand on certain issues. And that basically, I'm sure that he's kind of made a deal with Sheldon Adelson wing of the Republican Party, which says, look, I've given Israel everything they've wanted over the first 18 months of my administration. Now you're going to give me this, this, and this, or I'm going to go back on all of this because I'm now in control and you're not. That may be what's going on. Everybody always, we always like lose our minds that, the freaking, I mean, so many people on the right, especially, lose their minds over Jewish influence and over AIPAC's influence within the American administration. They forget that sometimes someone is going to stand up and say, no. I've heard multiple reports of Trump just being freaking ticked off with Bibi Netanyahu, constantly calling him up on the phone and whining for some other damn concession. He's like, fuck off. And so I know that there's real frustration there, but I also know that there's also real corruption there as well. So we'll see. Bolton into Russia. And so Thordoom says, I think the whole Bolton in Russia could tell us that Trump wants Putin to help him with Iran. Not sure I buy any of that. And I'll be honest with you. I think Bolton in Russia is about trying to do the something for nothing thing. I believe the story that Bolton went in and asked for. Trump doesn't have much to offer Putin, but he's mostly what I heard was that Bolton offered another one of those something for nothing things. How was it again? Talking about it just the other night. That the thing about ending war games as a starter point, right? That we would stop NATO war games on the Russian borders if the Russians would stop war games inside their own borders. Again, that's the best you got to offer. It's a Kissinger-like thing. But Trump is offering Putin a whole lot of stuff at this point. Go look, right? No sanctions on Nordstream 2. Getting out of the way in Daraa. This morning, there was the ceasefire in Ukraine, in the Donbass. All of a sudden, the Ukrainians just stopped shelling, and there was a ceasefire. 2 days or 3 days after they've been shelling and bombing civilians now for weeks, and now all of a sudden 2 days after John Bolton shows up in Moscow, they stop, and all of a sudden there's a ceasefire. Remember, Poroshenko's support in Ukraine is very tenuous. Yeah. So Liz Sandy reminds us that Trump understands that trade deals can equal peace. He will blow up the old ideas. I think he's already doing that. And I think that he's going to go in to the NATO summit and announce, I think he's ready to announce a drastic drawdown in American involvement in NATO. Yes, Joanne, the Ukrainian ceasefire is amazing. When I saw that this morning, I was like, wow. We were expecting the others. We were expecting the opposite, right? So how much egg do I have on my face saying most likely there's going to be an escalation or a false flag or something in Ukraine because they're gearing up for it? And now we get the opposite. And what does this tell you? It tells you that Trump and Bolton and the rest of them may actually be on the right side here. Because remember, at the end of the day, it's very obvious that the freaking limeys were behind 90% of this shit. Freaking MI6 was behind Russiagate. It was behind the Skripal poisoning. It was behind all of it. They already broke the ceasefire. Well, you can't trust Poroshenko about anything. Because he wouldn't... Right, I thought they would start a major offensive toward him. No, you can't trust Poroshenko on anything. He is only going to stay in power if he keeps the hardliners at bay. Right? He keeps the neo-Nazis and Azov Battalion and the right sector freaking Nazis at bay. And that's the problem. So he's going to continue to not implement Minsk as a point of pride, because otherwise he's going to get hung. Okay? But I don't think Trump has any use for Poroshenko at all. I think he's willing to trade Ukraine, which I'm sure he feels is nothing but an Obama-McCain mess that has nothing to do with reality, and it's absolutely one of the dumbest things that we've ever been involved in. And it's handed, I'm sure from his perspective, it's handed Putin the means by which to then implement Nord Stream 2 and hand more political control of over Europe to Merkel, which he hates. So you can see how all of this plays out. I mean, if you start to really think about it from that perspective, this all makes sense that they're going to do something. We're going to do something that he's going to do something to blow all these things up. So, yeah, with the Chalupa clan, which works for Clinton, exactly. The whole MI6 thing, and Lee Stranahan's been all over this with the Alexandra Chalupa thing, and it's all amazing. Yes, the Azov Battalion / neo-Nazi right sector guys are always threatening Poroshenko. He knows, I mean, he's got very little support in the Rada. He's got like 9% approval rating. He's going to get voted out of office. So then now the question is, what comes in the power in Ukraine? Everybody has to think of Ukraine as a complete, utterly failed state. Even afternoon, Buck, mostly just wanted to like talk for about 35, 40 minutes. I'm going to be getting off in just a little bit here. I wanted to change the format up outside of our normal Monday and Friday live streams and go back to doing a little shorter ones, which are more focused, less Q&A, less me, because I've been watching them and I'm like, they're not really cogent. So I need to kind of just spend some time chatting on my own for about 15, 20 minutes, and then getting some information out there, and then taking interaction from the rest of you. So I am going to try and change these up, these shorter ones. I'm going to try and change up the format a little bit, because I'm noticing that there's less and less traction and less. It's more interaction for us, which is good, but at the same time, it's also a little bit. It's also not good for grabbing new people. All right, so that's really what I wanted to talk about today. Tomorrow night, 9 o'clock will be on, or 8 o'clock will be on again. I'll try and do one Wednesday morning about this, and we'll data as to what's going on. In the middle of writing this month's newsletter, which is coming along nicely. I've got my commentaries left to do, and I've also got to get off here now and go write an article for Strategic Culture about what I'm not really sure. So you guys take care. You have a great afternoon. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Keep your stick on the ice.